So people can see we're not making this up. Michael Dougherty says this with his own words. And regarding that middle path, he alludes to the fact that Phil Weiser's office helped the city of Boulder find, quote unquote, outside counsel, quote unquote, resources, and quote unquote, support. And here's a full quote. He says, "He didn't decline to be involved at all, from my view, and from my understanding of the litigation. I know that the Attorney General's office has strongly supported the work of Boulder County and our allies in this fight." This raises the question that state taxpayers are potentially on the hook for this, which is a big freaking deal. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy right here in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. Right off the bat, this episode, before we jump into our topic for the week, we thought we wanted to give you a quick update on our handy-dandy generator contest. We have decided to extend the voting for this through the month of June. So where it was originally going to end, I think somewhere around mid-June, we're actually going to kick that out. So if you're watching right now, be sure to get those last-minute votes in to help someone do what we always say here on the program and firm their own grid. So through the month of June, we will likely announce a winner probably sometime after the 4th of July holiday, just for simplicity's sake, when more people will be tuned in. But the voting will officially close on June 30th.
And I think they vote at PowerGab.org.
That's
Go
right.
to PowerGab.org, PowerGab.org. Send your friends, too.
Yep. Great point. But the topic that we're going to talk about today has to do with something that I think this is actually going to be coming out on primary day, so it's fitting. But it has to do with our current Attorney General and something that came up during the debate for who is going to replace our current Attorney General. And it deals with a topic that we've covered pretty extensively on the show, and that is the Boulder County lawsuit against Suncor and Exxon that essentially tries to use state tort law to quote unquote, hold them accountable for climate change and all of the climate damages that they've done ostensibly to Boulder specifically, because Boulder thinks so highly of themselves. And what was revealed during an exchange by a bunch of the Democratic candidates at the Attorney General debate is that current Attorney General Phil Weiser may have, used his position as a statewide elected official to aid Boulder's quest against these fossil fuel companies, even though for years he has said that he thinks that their legal case is not so sound.
And with good reason, by the way.
Yeah, no, he wasn't wrong then.
Yeah, he wasn't wrong. So this was really interesting. There was a candidates panel debate. I wouldn't call it a debate. It was really more of a panel. This was the only person they really went after was the candidate who wasn't there was Jenna Griswold. But let's set this up real quick. There are 4 candidates on the Democrat side for the Democrat primary for Attorney General. The quote front runner is current Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. She has a whole host of issues, which apparently she doesn't really want to talk about or defend. Yeah. Or even tell you really what she would do as AG.
Right.
So she never shows up at any of these things. So you have the other 3, and I'm going to read these. So Hatel Doshi, who, by the way, smart. She's a former federal prosecutor under the Obama administration and former U.S. Attorney General, or former Attorney General for Colorado, or I should say deputy, not U.S., and it's deputy. Then there's David Seligman, who is the executive director of a nonprofit called Towards Justice. And I think he helps tenants and illegal aliens and those people navigate the legal system. Then the last one is Michael Dougherty, and he's the current Boulder DA. And so when it was Jesse Paul from
The Sun.
Yeah, and there was one anyway. The question was about Boulder County's case lawsuit against Suncor and Exxon that is now in front of the United States Supreme Court. Oral arguments will be sometime this fall, and they're suing them over climate damage. And the real goal of this, as we have said, it's a backdoor carbon tax.
Yeah.
That what they can't get done legislatively, they want to get done through the judicial system, and that is they're hoping that they just win one of these lawsuits, and there are a whole bunch. It's not just the city and county of Boulder, but there are a whole bunch of these lawsuits across the country. They just need to win one, and then the hope is the company that they sue then loses and either goes bankrupt or files for bankruptcy or comes up with some kind of a settlement agreement that includes a carbon tax. How do we know that? Well, the attorney who was one of the original attorneys on this case said that out loud to an audience at the Federalist Society.
Yeah.
So I'm not making that up. That's not me saying that. That's what the attorneys for the city and county of Boulder were saying. They want a carbon tax that they can't get through Congress. So we're just going to sue until we get one. And again, they only have to win one. So the Suncor case came up because it is the city and county of Boulder. It's once again Colorado on display at the United States Supreme Court. The question first went to Michael Dougherty. He's the one who spilled the beans. And he actually said, this is where I'm so proud of my community of Boulder for their, courage to stand up to Suncor and Exxon, and the theme of this whole all of the panelists throughout this, it's like a little over an hour, was affordability, power to the people over profits, all of that. So here they are, and here it starts with Michael Dougherty, who says, I'm so proud of Boulder. I'm so behind what they're doing. And then he talked about Phil Weiser, who used to be at CU Boulder as a professor, now current attorney general. And he says Phil Weiser had three options. He could wholly full-throated endorse it. That's one. Two, he could wholly full-throated oppose it. Or three, he could take a middle ground. Well, publicly, he said one thing, and apparently privately, he did another. And publicly, he, to your point, you mentioned it, he criticized, he thought it was a weak legal argument.
That's right.
Kind of criticized it, said, not really getting involved. But according to Michael Dougherty, who's the DA in Boulder, he took the middle ground, which was you're not doing either one of those, but you're helping quietly, maybe behind the scenes. You're doing some things to help the case along.
Yeah. So this was actually, caught by someone named Kyle Coley. He writes for a website called Energy in Depth, and I saw this article, and we'll link to it in the show notes as well, so people can see, because he actually links to the timestamped clip, so people can see we're not making this up. Michael Dougherty says this with his own words, and regarding that middle path, he alludes to the fact that Phil Weiser's office helped the city of Boulder find "quote unquote" outside counsel, "quote unquote" resources, and "quote unquote" support. And here's a full quote. He says, "He didn't decline to be involved at all, from my view and from my understanding of the litigation. I know that the Attorney General's office has strongly supported the work of Boulder County and our allies in this fight." And so, that raises a big question then. Are state taxpayer resources, because we already know Boulder taxpayers are footing the bill for this as a result of the city and county initiating this litigation. But this raises the question that state taxpayers are potentially on the hook for this, or in some way, shape, or form funding an attack on the city's or the state's only oil refinery.
Only refinery. And only one.
Two, one of the big oil majors that produces, one of the most important fuel sources on Earth at the moment that we use every single day, which is a big freaking deal, I think.
And by the way, produces in Colorado.
That's right. Yeah. No, we're the fourth largest oil producing state in the country. So it's a big deal. And it would be huge news to know that the Attorney General, even though he's publicly saying that this is kind of borderline frivolous and I'm declining to be involved, he's actually expending state resources to help bolster these claims that now find themselves before the Supreme Court once again.
And actually, this thing has real legs on it. Maybe, and that's why we're here, to connect the dots for you. And it may take some time, may not impact the primary, but whatever happens going forward, I think this thing has legs through the midterms, and I think it also is national. Couple of things. One is that City and County of Boulder claim that nonprofits are paying for this, and if there is no fee unless there's a victory. Now, I still think that if you were to dig deep, there are taxpayer resources going to that from the City and County of Boulder. They're probably fine with that. State resources, on the other hand,
different story.
That is a whole different ball game. So here are a couple of things on this, and I mentioned this earlier. I'd be curious to get your take on this, Jake. These three candidates that were there, it was all about people over profits, and it was all about affordability. It was a very Democrat populist tone.
Yeah.
And yet all three of them couldn't say enough. They couldn't overstate how much they support this lawsuit. And they couldn't say it enough. They couldn't hate these industries more. They couldn't love this lawsuit more. But here's the thing on this, and this is where, the irony is probably lost on them, but certainly wasn't lost on me, and I hope not others. The very lawsuit that they love will drive up gasoline prices significantly. And let me just throw out an example. Let's just say that let's say they prevail, and Exxon and Chevron, or Suncor and Exxon decide that they are going to, part of the settlement agreement, we're going to champion a carbon tax, and somehow they get that passed. Well, do you know what that's going to do to gas prices in Colorado? Our state, what is our state tax? 22 cents.
22 cents, yeah.
And I think the feds is something like 18.
Roughly. And then we have a separate fee on gasoline as well.
Then there's a fee. Well, imagine if this carbon tax, which you wouldn't have to be terribly high, let's say $50 a ton or something like that, could end up as 45 to 50 cents a gallon additional.
Yep.
And what does that go to? Not to you or me. That is simply going to some kind of climate initiative. It would reward the very people who are bringing these lawsuits. So please don't sit there and say that you are a champion of the little people,
right,
when you are in support of a lawsuit that would do nothing but drive up the cost of energy for those very little people.
No, yeah, and this isn't even just a theoretical exercise that we're forecasting here, because we have examples of this in the United States right now with California and Washington State. Both, it's not a simple carbon tax, it's more of a cap and trade system, but it's the same concept, right? You're pricing the carbon emissions that come from gasoline. And I don't know if folks, gas is pretty expensive all over these days, but I don't know if folks have taken a look at what gas prices cost in California and Washington State anytime soon lately, but they are way outliers from the rest of the country as a result of, at least in part, that very policy of trying to price carbon. Not only that, though, it's not just, if they come to some agreement where they're going to back a carbon tax, but one of the big ticket items that the Boulder County is looking for in this lawsuit is, I forget what the exact dollar figure is, but it's a multi-billion-dollar judgment against these oil and gas companies too. And if you don't think that's going to be devastating to the bottom line of consumers, you're out to lunch. Because I don't know if you folks know of any companies that are willing to just take multi-billion-dollar judgments on the chin and not recoup those costs somewhere. But that's going to also impact the bottom line. So to your point, it's a great point to make, that it is rich to hear the very same people that say that they're laser focused on affordability and on consumers, and that's their first priority, literally going after and trying to deliberately raise the cost of something that is a fundamental input into everything that consumers use.
And I got to say, first of all, it would be horrible if at the Supreme Court, Suncor and others, and by the way, the Independence Institute we filed an amicus brief.
Right.
So we should put that out there. And ours was about horizontal federalism. We did a show on it. So go back and look at that. We won't get into the details of that brief. But to have Boulder, if they were to win this, this is personal, I get it, but they would be insufferable.
Yeah.
The smugness would be insufferable. But that said, I'll tell you what, this is why I think this story has legs, or the Suncor, this lawsuit, this one of 24 lawsuits around across the country on climate change, essentially climate change, and what they really want is a carbon tax, is that I think if you are a smart reporter and energy is an issue, and it's an issue, by the way, affordability and energy issues across the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ask every candidate where they stand on that lawsuit. Do you support it? Because if you do, I would question whether or not you actually support affordability. Yeah. And the answer to that is you don't. You can't be on the side of affordability and be on the side of wanting this lawsuit to be successful. The other thing that I thought was hilarious was David Seligman, who said, yeah, I'm optimistic about this. I don't think that the other side, they're making, weak arguments. I'm going, well, I like our chances better than I like yours. That said, I think every candidate, and I'd be asking this, and you should ask it of your state lawmakers, ask it of everyone. Do you support the Suncor lawsuit, or the lawsuit against Suncor, the Boulder City and County lawsuit against Suncor? Do you support it? If they do, they cannot be on the side of affordability, because what they're going to do is drive up your rates. And I would say that for every race in Colorado, state legislative race, plus the governor's race, yep. Phil Weiser is going to have to answer that question at some point.
Yep.
And then also the other one that I think it might be a huge impact on is CD8.
Yeah.
Where
that's a great point.
Whoever that is, CD8, which is Gabe Evans right now, Weld County is in it, my home county. We are the home of oil and gas in Colorado. That's if either of those candidates come out, and I would ask them, put them on the record, yep. Force them to answer that. There's Shannon Bird and Manny Rutinell.
Right. Whose background, by the way, is at an environmental NGO, which makes it a prime, question to ask someone like that with that background.
And he was like general counsel or something. Mm-hmm. So, and he opposed hydraulic fracturing. Yeah. Until just a few months ago.
I was going to say, he's very quickly running away from a lot of the positions he's taken. So, maybe he will deny that he supports this, but it's still worth asking someone that wants to represent a county where oil and gas is so very important, or a region, a congressional district. And the Phil Weiser point is great as well. Perhaps Michael Dougherty misspoke. Maybe he was wrong, but to me, it sure seems like he let slip something that Phil Weiser has never publicly confirmed. And someone should ask him about that, because that's a big deal, whether or not it comes before the primary or after, if he wins the nomination to be governor. Trying to be governor in the state of Colorado right now, to your point, means running on affordability, because it's what everybody's talking about. It's what every candidate wants to talk about. And boy, oh boy, if you want to be in the top statewide office in this state, you ought to be on record as to where you stand on something that would be extremely damaging to affordability.
And don't listen to a word when somebody just says, oh, yeah, if we win, we get billions and it's all going to go back to consumers. Yeah, well, in the form of higher prices, it will go back. But I'll tell you where that money isn't going to go: into your pockets. Yeah. It's going to come back to you. It's actually going to be taken out of your pockets in order to pay for any kind of settlement. But the worst thing that could happen would be this backdoor carbon tax, which would drive up the price of not just gasoline, but everything, because energy is the economic paradigm. The reason, especially during the Biden administration, when gas prices went super high, you saw inflation skyrocket. The reason for that was the cost of gasoline, the cost of energy is in everything. Yep. So it is the driver of inflation, or at least one of the main drivers of inflation right now.
Yeah, that's right. It goes into not just obviously fueling your vehicles and stuff, but the transportation to get goods to where they need to go, to places you can buy them. It's in clothing, it's in medicine. Everything is a byproduct of oil and gas. And if you're raising the cost of that, you stand to cause some economic pain. But as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, don't let Jenna Griswold off the hook, because she's endorsed by Jane Fonda, who is, I wouldn't even call Jane Fonda anti-fossil fuel. I just call her anti-energy. Hates nuclear, hates oil and gas. So Jenna Griswold, even though she didn't show up there and she didn't answer the question, she is endorsed by Jane Fonda and she's proud of it. So I wouldn't let her off the hook with this. That's number one. Number two, this is a backdoor carbon tax. And in this time of affordability, when affordability is the theme of the midterms, this is a backdoor carbon tax, which will cost you, me, Jake, everybody listening, everybody across the country, cost a fortune. And it's the furthest thing from affordability. And then, as always, firm your own grid. You'll want to get your, if you have a gasoline-powered one, you're going to want to fill your gas can now.
Yeah, before the carbon tax.
Before the carbon tax kicks in, should, if it's unfortunate enough, if we're unfortunate enough to have the United States Supreme Court rule in Denver or in Boulder City and County's favor. So the takeaways, one last vote.
That's right. Yeah.
So
PowerGab.org. Just another reminder, it is, when this comes out, will probably be, I think, the last day for voting. So if you're watching this as this comes out, make sure to get those votes in. But otherwise, that does it for us on another episode of PowerGab. If folks like what they saw, they can head over to PowerGab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio-only shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview on the show, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. And until next week, we'll see you.